around the concept of an eyewitness testimony for the Big Bang, we now open it up to you of the floor to have your say. So first of all, we'd like a question for the proposition. That's to say, for Professor Habermas, someone who would like to ask him a question. The gentleman in the blue shirt? There's a microphone coming your way, sir.
You haven't actually told us for the first, second, well, in particular, first and second arguments, specifically which of the 4 points you are rejecting. Could you give us a number, please, for each of them?
Okay. I mean, for example, in the first argument, okay, third down there. The evidence gives reason for me to prefer one hypothesis over another. We should give them equal weight. The evidence gives no reason to prefer resurrection or any other supernatural explanation. Therefore, we could go with another one. I'm saying, to go to number 3, I'm saying if you have a case of groups who say, I've seen something, and you say, as in number 3, therefore, we could have a case of hallucination, I'm saying it does not follow. It does not follow that just to say hallucination, one hallucination is not going to do it. So now if you want to say hallucination, 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 I'm saying overall it's going to break down with empirical, if you come back against this with empirical evidence. That's the point I was getting at number 3. Maybe I'm not being clear. I don't know.
Okay, and you're right to reply.
Thanks very much. I couldn't discern an answer to the question in that response. The question being, in the first argument, which of the first 3 sentences does he deny? In the second argument, which of the first 3 sentences does he deny? And in the third argument, which of the first 2 sentences does he deny? But I do think that Gary implicitly denied premise 2 of the third argument on the grounds that group hallucination or multiple hallucination, even if it was supernatural, is less likely than a single resurrection. That's what I took to be his argument. And that would be an argument against premise 2. Let me just defend premise 2 in these words. If we're allowing supernatural events, so for instance, God can produce a resurrection or God can produce a hallucination, it seems to me that if he can click his fingers to produce a supernatural resurrection, he can also click his fingers to produce 5 hallucinations, or 505 if you wanted, or 513, whatever the number was. So it seems to me there's no reason to think that if you are allowing supernatural explanations, there's no reason whatever to think that multiple supernatural hallucinations are any less plausible or easier to produce than a single resurrection.
Okay. Do we have a question for the opposition? The gentleman next to the gentleman in the blue shirt.
I'm just trying to understand your argument. Would you say that because you're an atheist, that makes you more skeptical of resurrection? Or would you say that you, in the beginning, you don't believe in resurrection, and because that's the essence of Christianity, that makes you an atheist? What's your starting point?
I think, yes, this is a sensible question. So the question, for those of you who didn't hear it, the question was, do I deny resurrection because I'm an atheist, or I'm an atheist because I deny resurrection? Well, I'm an atheist because I don't think there's any reason whatever, I can't see any good arguments for believing in God, and for the same reason I don't believe resurrection. So I guess I would probably take the second option. That is, I'm an atheist in part because I see no good evidence for the resurrection.
Just reply.
Well, I can't reply on his autobiography, but I would think, and we chatted today, and I have no reason to, I'm serious, I have no reason to question anything he's saying by way of his autobiographical comments. But just in general, sometimes people say they're open to things, they're not really. They say produce evidence. When you produce evidence, they say, and you can always say more evidence, more evidence, more evidence. Real briefly, on the third argument, second premise, I was not arguing for supernatural hallucinations. Now, if you want to introduce that into it, God can give supernatural hallucinations 513 or whatever. Yes, he can. Of course, if God gave a supernatural hallucination, I guess we'd have a God. So I guess we'd have an issue here. But all I was saying was it could be that one appearance is more likely than several natural group hallucinations. We don't know them. Other than that, I want you folks to know this guy is a nice fella. I really would like to be over here and we could talk and push each other in 24/7. I don't question him personally.
Okay. If anyone has a question in abstention, that's to say for neither side in particular, I don't know who we get to answer it, but if anyone does, a man over there has. I'm intrigued.
I guess, I mean, this is supporting really one side of the issue, but it's also disagreeing with both of the speakers slightly. So, in that, I think there's a slight mischaracterization of what the issue is in the passage from Corinthians, about whether the Corinthians believed in the resurrection, because I think Dr. Ahmed suggested that they didn't, and Professor Habermas, I think, conceded that when he needn't have. And I think the issue in what the Corinthians were denying was, or were doubting, was not, I don't think, the bodily resurrection of Jesus. It was the future bodily resurrection of believers. And so Paul is arguing, he lays out, this is what I proclaimed, that Christ died, he rose from the dead, and then he gives all this list of witnesses. And he's saying, on the basis of this, it's therefore inconsistent that you are denying the idea of bodily resurrection, which is because of their Greek kind of philosophical beliefs in kind of the immortality of the soul rather than bodily resurrection. So I think, yes, I mean, this passage is talking about the resurrection, but I think Paul he's arguing from their belief in the resurrection of Jesus as a way of saying, therefore, you should get the rest of your kind of belief system in line with that in a way which is consistent with that.
Okay, we'll give you a minute each in this case.
Thanks very much. I don't have too much to say in response to that clarification, but I'm most grateful for it. I thought, Gary will correct me on this, I thought he said if Jesus wasn't raised, then your belief in my preaching is in vain. Is that right?
That's Paul.
Yes, he did say that in 1 Corinthians.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm not sure.
If Jesus isn't raised.
Pardon me?
He did say that.
If Jesus has not been, and then in verse 19 he says, if he's not been raised, we are of all men most miserable. So everything depends. That's a centrality claim.
Okay, so that seems to be evidence that at least part of his intention was to make them, was to convince them to believe that Jesus was raised. That was on what I based my conjecture.
Yeah, but no, I think he's raising a really good point here. And now on his behalf, want me to argue for him for a minute? He could just go on and say, but supposedly some Christians could have different, options about this. But I do, on resurrection. But I do want to say this: in the Corinthian account, if that was his objection, if that's what you're after, if his objection is you have some early believers in Corinth who deny the resurrection, if that was it, that definitely is a good point. They didn't deny resurrection. In fact, there's some different agreement. I mean, we don't know what they were saying because we don't have their side. But it seems that they were trying to say Jesus has been raised, but he's perhaps been raised in a little more Platonic, less bodily sense. But he's definitely been raised. Yeah, I don't think anybody thinks the Corinthians didn't believe in resurrection. So if that's the point, you'd have to look pretty hard to find cases of Christians in the first 20 years who didn't believe in resurrection. I think that's critical.
Okay, we're getting on in terms of time now, so questions could be kept brief. Anyone for the proposition? Yeah, a gentleman towards the back there.
Yeah, my question is, when we look at the history of the resurrection 2,000 years ago, certainly this is something that's been removed from our time today to look at observably in a laboratory or in a scientific investigation. So my question would be, how is it possible that if 2,000 years ago, if Jesus Christ did not rise again in bodily form, how can we explain that the resurrection could have even been carried on throughout history, when you consider the fact that this should have been the easiest event to disprove in the history of the world, because Saul of Tarsus was taught by Gamaliel, and he converted. You have all of the Roman leaders, when we talk about Pontius Pilate, the governor of Judea, when we talk about Herod Antipas, when we talk about these different people, and the fact that Christianity spread from Jerusalem to Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth. This should have been the easiest event to disprove because all they would have had to do was bring out the body. So how do we explain the fact that Christianity could survive and that so many lives have been changed to this point by the power of Jesus Christ because he's risen again from the dead? And I would like to ask how that could be proven.
Okay, I believe that was in fact a question to the opposition. Just an inkling. In which case we'll let Dr. Ahmed answer this one and then go for another one really for proposition.
Thank you very much. I think there's 3 points I'd like to make in response to that question. The first point is that because a religion has many adherents and spreads quickly,